Okay, welcome everyone. Hopefully you all can see the agenda that we have today. We're kind of going to give a little bit start with Robert and do a little recap of our flooding tidal trends from 2025, a little bit of forecast of any projections we know with our king tide schedule and all for 2026. And then that'll follow. I'll do a very brief update on some of the projects that I've been keeping y'all in the loop in over the past year. And then the mayor is going to do a more in-depth detailed presentation, I think, on one of our larger resilience projects that has a lot of public and community interest, our battery extension project. And then time withstanding and leaving, we're gonna Matt may do a brief little stormwater update to kind of tease for what we can talk about at a next meeting and getting a little more depth of detail there. So knowing we are on a time constraint, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Robert to just give us a brief synopsis of what flooding trends we saw in 2025 and a bit of the forecast we know looking into 2026. So Robert, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow you to take the reins.
Okay, thanks, Kaylin. So, FloodStat, this is an opportunity to share some of the data that we continually collect, the flood-related data. And since we're at the beginning of a new year, we thought it'd be a good chance to look at all of 2025. So, at the end of December, the National Weather Service updates their tides by year chart. And so it's updated with the 2025 data. So we had 52 flood stage tides in 2025, which was slightly less than the year before. And both of those years were less than some of the preceding years. So even though those are lower numbers than the handful of preceding years, it's still, both those years are in the top 10 ever recorded. So it's different ways to look at this data. Those are still very high, and the trend is still continuing. And then the Weather Service also does the average number of events for every 10 years. And it's just interesting to note from 2000 to 2010, there was average 21 events per year. And then from 2010 to 2020, that doubled to 40 events a year. And now with just 5 years into this decade, we're averaging 60 events a year. And if you just kind of project that out and assume it'll be the same increase the next 5 years, we'll be at 80 events a year by 2030. Another chart that this is kind of interesting, that our tidal flooding events they really increase in September and October, that almost double the number of events in those 2 months for many of the other months of the year. It's just something to be aware of, that it's a little bit worse in those months. Then this is our city dashboard that you can look at the tides by year. So this is 2025, 36 low minor flood stage events, 13 in the moderate, which is 7.5 foot to 8 foot. That's when we really start to see impact, that a handful of roads are going to be inundated. And then as you get close to 8 feet, that those are pretty impactful to the city. And then over 8 feet, it's large parts of the peninsula possibly could be shut down. And we only had one of those this year. A lot of close to 8 foot tides, though. I think we were projected to get 8 several times, but it didn't quite get there. So, and then I thought I'd like to show where this data comes from, that the Weather Service puts all this together. And part of the reason I wanted to show this is that they put all this data together and have it so anybody can get it. They have the charts all done for you, several different types of charts. And it's pretty powerful tools if you need to illustrate, the issues that Charleston's facing instead of a generic, yeah, flooding. Charleston has a flooding problem. That when you show people these charts, you can really kind of visualize, what our threats are. So I'm just gonna jump out of here quickly and go to their website. And yeah, it's just and this is our local National Weather Service office that puts all this together, and it's some pretty good stuff. So the events by year, that's the chart we were looking at. That's a pretty good one. And then they have lots of other ones, the charts, events by month. And I thought this is an interesting one. Number of flooding events by time of day. That I saw this for the first time yesterday. That I really didn't know that our flood events they're kind of concentrated at these two times a day. So that's kind of between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m. and then between 5 and later on in the evening. And
Traffic time.
so yeah, both those are, our commute times. And it's interesting. I always wondered why we had all of our flooding events kind of outside of work hours, so I couldn't drive around and take pictures, and that's why. But then all this raw data is here too. You can copy and paste this into Excel, and that's what I did because I wanted to do different colors. It's just really easy to use data. The charts are there for you. So I think everybody in Charleston should be familiar with this and be able to show people and use them as tools to talk to people about what we're facing. So I'll jump back to our slideshow. And so yeah, we're looking at, we're kind of looking in the past, just looking at the tides that we've had. We always have to remember that sea level rise is occurring, and that for Charleston, this is from the City of Charleston's sea level rise strategy that was last updated around 2019. And at that point, we're looking at the different projections for sea level rise, and that we're planning for 2 to 3 feet over the next 50 years, which would be around 2070. So what does that mean? Um, how would you how can you help describe that? So let's look at our tides from last year. This is what 2025 looked like. Well, what if we had 6 inches of sea level rise with these same tide levels? And you can see it's pretty dramatically different that the number of minor tides over doubled. We get 36 moderate tides and then 14 tides over 8 feet. And that's a lot of resources are get used at the city when we get these 8 foot tides, that there's a lot of preparation, especially in our emergency management staff, police and fire to get ready for these events. So that's a lot of events for one year. And that's not too far into the future. And then we'll go a step further and look at with 1 foot of sea level rise, and that's going to be probably before 2070 based on the current projections. And at that point, we're at 50 over 50 tides over 8 feet. And I didn't look, but some of those are going to be over 9 feet. So that's what the future looks like. And then looking a little bit more at 2025, some of the data that we collect are road closure data. So these are road closures that were mapped. And this is by no means all impacted roads, that these are just roads that they're usually more heavily traveled roads that the police department will barricade and that they get put into the system. So it's just an idea of these are the number of days we had significant flooding issues, but it's by no means a count of all flooded roads in the city. So, yeah, there was 379 total closures, and those happened on 36 different days. And it's interesting to look at what the conditions were on those days. And so yeah, that first category is just the tide. So this could be a sunny day. That there was 23 days where we had tides over the flood threshold with no rain, and 205 road closures were mapped. And then the next category is high tide with rain, and these are the worst events. That this is a compound flooding where we have a high tide and then we have rain on top of it, and we had a few of those in the fall. So those 3 days, and just those 3 days, there was 63 road closures mapped. And then the next category are flooding days that don't show up on those tidal charts we were looking at. And these days are increasing as well, that we're getting more and more extreme rain events. So that really the charts we were just looking at, you know, they're probably worse than what they appear, because we're also getting rain events. So no high tide, low tide, and rain. So 9 of those days we had heavy enough rain to close 111 roads. And then I had the fire department pull the number of rescues that they responded to in 2025, and it was 51. And that's by no means all the flooded cars. These are people that they called 911 and said, "I need help getting out of my car." And that happened 51 times. Um, and then I didn't quite have time to get the king tides for this year, but they are in tie-dye. That if you open up tie-dye on your phone, or the desktop version that we're looking at here, the 2026 schedule is in there. So that's something always to remember. We know when the king tides are, so you can plan for them. And especially those fall ones that we saw from the previous charts, that the fall ones are usually can be significantly worse than the spring ones. And let's see. I think that is all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Great presentation. Interesting. Concerning.
Thanks, Robert. I think, as always, your reporting out of our trends and data is always impactful to then go into what we're actually doing about it. So I'm going to do a quick little update of some of the resilience projects that I've talked to y'all about, and then that's going to segue into the mayor's broader presentation today on the battery extension project. So really quickly, hopefully y'all can see my screen. I think when we last met back in November, I had talked about the concept of our just corridor, or ecological corridor, that we've been working on to build this kind of nature-based system throughout the peninsula as a pilot, and replicating that across the city as well. And we had gone after some grant funding for the restoration of the New Market Creek area, which is a water plan project area, but also adjacent to already undergoing work on the low line as that linear park. Excited to announce we did get a $1 million NIFWF grant award to kick off this work. So that's really exciting. And then also part of the ecological corridor on the peninsula, we've kicked off work in the Halsey Creek neighborhood and Wagner Terrace neighborhood. There's some significant stormwater flooding, tidal flooding happening around Gordon Street. So we've kicked off some work for that impacts. And again, that's something we're hoping to pilot in other areas of the city as we move forward with that. I've talked to this group before about the city is in a partnership with College of Charleston to, we have a lot of data that Robert and his team tracks, and we are starting to collect more data on groundwater and what those impacts are. So I'm hoping by our March meeting or our summer meeting, we'll be able to get the students we have collecting this data for us over at the college to give you a little data report out. They're working on a dashboard too that we could hopefully embed with tie-dye so folks can see this data in real time. Also, you've had our water plan team brief you on the work that we're part of with the Rosemont community for their flood action plan under their resilience plan. We are finalizing some of those project sheets and that flood action plan work for the community. Hopefully by next month, we'll be in front of the community again, delivering these plans. So very excited about that. Again, that is something, this kind of adaptation planning effort that's come from the water plan that we hope to replicate and pilot in other areas of the city. Similarly, we've talked about how we've doing this work with partnerships. We've partnered with the Sustainability Institute and has received some grant funding to do some similar work that's been done in Rosemont and what we're doing in Halsey Creek neighborhood and over in James Island off in the Battery Island Drive, Artillery Point neighborhoods, and in West Ashley and Maryville and Ashleyville. A lot of nature-based work for flooding solutions happening part of this project. Again, you're looking at our basin map here that our water plan put together for us. So we start talking about planning for water by our basins and not just our neighborhood or jurisdictional boundaries. And with that in mind, there's been a lot of work underway that I've partook in the city and regionally building up a resilience network with the county and our other municipal partners. So we're all planning and working towards the same goals. So really exciting news. The county had their first resilience and sustainability symposium last fall. Mayor was there with the Mayor Burgess and some of the other mayors and county chairmen talking about kind of these collective goals on resilience and flood mitigation that we can work towards. So really excited to announce that we're having kind of an official setup of that next month and more to come on what that will look like and public engagement from that. And I also talked about at our last meeting that the intergovernmental county task force was rebooted last fall. They have their next meeting February 13th. Once I get the final time and information for that, I'll send that out. But there is a link that folks can sign up to. They want to send some pictures and stuff for the county and the multi-jurisdictions to work on for some problematic flooding areas. That's the best route to do that. And then our tidal and inland flood study that we have underway with the Army Corps of Engineers. We are really excited to announce it's going to go before County Council in a few weeks that the city is going to lead these, what's called the engineering with nature component of the study. So that's looking at these nature-based solutions that have been conceptualized in the water plan and taking them to the next progression of their design and engineering phase. So really excited about that. That work's kicking off. We're going to start that work in James Island, West Ashley, and Peninsula as directed from the water plan. And then that kind of also goes with our WaterWise engagements. We'll be looking to do some public workshops and community meetings for some of this tidal inland work, some of the work the mayor will be talking about on the battery extension, and some other stormwater projects as well. So stay tuned for some of those engagements, but I put that there too, because also welcome you all as your community ambassadors on this committee for flooding and water issues to reach out to me, reach out to our team if you have some good ideas in your neighborhood and community where we can host some of these engagements. I welcome that input. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead. Obviously, one of our biggest projects in resilience land is our battery extension project. And the mayor is here today to give a little more in-depth update about where we're at with that with the Army Corps as we, signed our official design agreement last fall that I relayed to you all at our last meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mayor, do you want to pull up your slides or I can pull them up for you?
I think I can pull them up.
Okay, we got them. You ready to drive that? Okay. Then the floor is yours.
Okay. There we go. I think I'm doing it.
It's coming.
Coming.
Slow, but
There we go. All right, so I appreciate it, Kaylin. This is a lot of slides, so I'm going to whip through them, but we'll be able to cover, I think, a lot of ground here. So let's see. I'll just do this. So, I don't have to tell y'all that it floods on the peninsula, right? We've got flooding within the city, market area. This is obviously Haygood. We've put this together for kind of the general population to try and educate, because there's a lot of misinformation going on out there. But just highlighting the fact that there are three types of flooding. We've got rainfall flooding that obviously comes from the sky, really impacts oftentimes the medical district. We've also got tidal flooding, which we've mentioned and talked about. Robert did a good presentation there. And of course, storm surge, which doesn't just include hurricanes, as evidenced by the northeasterner that we had in 2023. So, combine all that with the fact that a lot of the city is fill, and, you get a lot of flooding. So what does that mean? Again, Robert went through a lot of this, but, when roads are underwater, it prevents traffic, it shuts down the hospital system, and we're seeing these trends. Again, this is a 10-year analysis of number of road closures that we've had across the peninsula, and it's, as pointed out earlier, it's getting worse and worse. This just speaks, again, just highlighting what Robert was talking about over the past 5 years. I think this is the past decade, and it really is an alarming trend. This too, just how it's getting worse. And what I did here, again, we have ones that are off of the water plan that show the projections out to 2070. Just for the folks that still have a hard time believing in sea level rise, we just took the actual data here and included that. So one of the things that has happened is, and I'll give a lot of credit to Mayor Tecklenburg, to really bringing this flooding concern to the general public dialogue. And the good news is that we've done a lot of analysis and study on this, particularly as it relates to the peninsula, but also across the city, as Caleb pointed out, with regards to the tidal and inland flooding analysis and the water plan. But we've done a ton of, collected a ton of data. And now I think, at least from my perspective, we need shovels in the ground. We need to start moving on a lot of this. And so that's what we're doing. Now, you're familiar with the perimeter protection, the PED analysis or PED study that was done by the Army Corps. And this was their original alignment that they had starting out. We've spent the past 2 years changing this so we can marry form and function, because a lot of what you had here, you're seeing, look at all of these gate systems. Those aren't very feasible to me, and would almost create worse issues, I think, on the peninsula. So not to be critical of the Corps, but it was more function than form, if you will. And so we've been working with them to design an aesthetic that becomes a real amenity and an alignment that works. But we've also, of course, worked with them to expand not just perimeter protection for storm surge, but look at all of tidal and inland flooding, which covers not just the peninsula, but all of the rest of the city, as Caleb was pointing out. In terms of the design, from my perspective, we have something that has worked for the past 200 years, and that is the battery. And it is, I think, a great marriage of form and function. You can see here dating back to the mid-19th century, early 19th century. It always has served as a promenade as well as protecting the city's built environment. Here are just some earlier renderings of some of the plans. This was the last major renovation that was done in 1893. And again, these are just some watercolors. One of the things that I like about it too is that you can actually see over it. This is the basic elevation for most of High Battery. And we're looking at a base elevation of the intersection of South Battery and East Battery, where those stairs are. And while you know there's a raised structure when you're driving down the battery, you can see the sky over it. You don't feel like you're driving next to a levee. And I think that's a pretty important aspect of making sure that this is, again, a marriage of form and function. Another part of this that, you know, we've obviously redone this portion of the battery, and, you know, want to make sure that we can do things that, again, create more of a linear park and not just a piece of infrastructure. So we're looking at how it can connect all the way around the peninsula, but also tie into UG Street. That will then tie into the low line and the improvements that are being made along Calhoun Street for bike and pedestrian safety to make this mobility around the peninsula have more options than just the car. So as Caleb pointed out, we have signed, after getting assurances on alignment and general design with the Army Corps, we've signed the design agreement. We are moving forward. It is full speed ahead. The initial phase that we are looking at is for High Battery, to replace High Battery, you know, just an extension of where the current work is completed and going to the Miss Roon House or Historic Charleston Foundation headquarters. That is going to be submitted for the federal budget this year. And we're optimistic that we can get that funding and start work on the first and smallest phase of it. And then every year, next year submit for the Western alignment, and then the year following submit for the Eastern alignment. Let me get to those, get through the watercolors. Again, this speaks to, would be phase one here, High Battery replacement. Phase two would be from the Coast Guard base all the way up to the Citadel and the Joe. And then phase three would be the Eastern alignment that would actually go all the way up through the Port Authority property to Newmarket Creek. And then the final phase would be Wagner Terrace and Rosemont, which are going to be less infrastructure and more nature-based solutions, because it makes a lot more sense to do that there. And that, and Mr. Maybank, I think you could speak to this, was the desire of a lot of the residents. But again, what you see here, we would tie this into the West Ashley Bridge coming in. It ties into the green belt so that you can ride your bike from, you know, Citadel Mall area all the way into town, loop around the battery, make your way over to Mount Pleasant. And then even if you wanted to tie back into the low line. So again, connectivity is a big, big part of this. Another thing that we're doing in an interim step, because Lockwood floods pretty dramatically and on a 6 foot tide, or 6.5 foot tide, we're putting in a knee wall here that will create a buffer for tidal flooding until such time as the Western alignment's done. But so that it's not just a temporary fix, we're incorporating this into the design of the larger battery, which I'll get to here in a minute. So the idea here, again, the core alignment had it going down Lockwood with gates in between that would be pretty cumbersome. What we've proposed is going proud of Lockwood and having floodgates throughout this wall. And this would be a pedestrian access from that you would enter off of Lockwood here at the bend, go down. And what this would do in conjunction with the knee wall is it would create another lake, like Long Lake here and like Colonial Lake, which serve as retention for stormwater. right? So this is multi-purpose in that the battery in its original intent would be to protect against tidal flooding and surge. This would also, by creating this lake that would be tidal fed and could remain salt marsh, added retention area. So we're trying to think very holistically about this and solve more than just one issue with this kind of investment. Again, amenities. Again, we've talked about how this would tie in, and I can go in, we have limited time, I could go into how this is relevant for the low line, the port, the aquarium, and Union Pier, obviously, but then also on the west side, the Arc Bridge, which we talked about, the Marina District, West Edge, and the affordable housing efforts and redevelopments that are being contemplated there, and of course the medical district, which MUSC is our largest employer, and obviously pretty critical to make sure that access is kept to the medical district for the region. But also, again, some of these affordable housing efforts that we have coming on the west side, east side too. Creating incredible public spaces too. I think Union Pier, a lot of the waterfront here would be a large park that would be larger in size than White Point Gardens, that would be always open to the public. Same thing with Brittlebank and options there, but also looking at Newmarket Creek and its outfalls and opportunities there. And these are also some of the larger areas where flooding, these are the large drainage areas for this part of the peninsula. I mean, all of this kind of drains into this basin here, and King Street is the main spine. Everything kind of drains this way. So we're looking at it from all different angles. Now, the battery, this is one really important piece of information. There's been a lot of misinformation. The battery is right now estimated to be about $1.4 billion to build and to design and build this over the next 7 years. I think from the trends that you all saw earlier, it's pretty clear to me that we need to do something. And with the federal government willing to pay 65% of it, now's the time to act. And it also, in terms of the local match, lines up pretty well as from a timing perspective as well. So if the battery cost about $1.3 billion, 1.3, I think it's 1.35, but the local match in aggregate would be $450 million approximately dollars, right? So I'd mentioned the port and its property. They have to do something to keep BMW from moving from Columbus Terminal. So they have to put a significant amount of infrastructure into that. So we've talked to them about designing with the battery extension in mind. Of course, it wouldn't be open to the public on their property, but they can provide approximately, $75 to $100 million, which they were going to have to spend anyway to deal with Columbus Terminal or protect Columbus Terminal. And this solution would be significantly better because it would be a more permanent solution. Same thing with the timing of Union Pier. That would be funded by that development, that local match. So when you take those two projects or segments of the battery extension, that takes the aggregate local need from 450 million down to about 300 million, which we are proposing would come from the transportation sales tax initiative that's going to be on the ballot this fall. And what I want to talk about, this is, well, if local would be, so we'll talk about the 300 million. The TST is estimated to raise about 4.25 billion. So this portion of it, or 300 million, would be about 7% of the total TST, but it would leverage all these other funding sources for a piece of infrastructure that would be a regional piece of infrastructure and protect the historic district, which is where a lot of revenue comes from for our tax base, sales taxes, accommodations taxes, property taxes, fees, you name it, income taxes. It is a 1 to 10 cost benefit ratio for the cost associated with it, according to an economic analysis done by the Army Corps. But here's the thing that I think is important that is really exciting to me. Again, we've talked about these basins, and I was referring to those earlier, and we talked about the different types of flooding. Well, what we did is we have, through all those original analysis that those studies that have been done over the past 10 and 12 years, we know every storm drain, and we can model all of this. And we can model it as with and without the battery extension being part of it. And so what we did is we took ideas like the Lockwood Lake that I talked about earlier, combined that with the battery, and modeled all of the different storm drainage existing. And we modeled it all after the December 2023 Northeaster, right? Which was the second highest flooding event that Charleston has had, or the peninsula has had, behind Hurricane Hugo. And it was a combination of tidal and surge with wind, but also a lot of rainfall. And here's what the flooding map looked like as a result of that storm. And again, we don't have as much on Wagner Terrace because we haven't, those aren't as mapped, but those haven't been modeled yet, but they will be modeled in the upcoming weeks. But here's what it looked like on the lower peninsula, east and west. And here's what it would look like with the battery extension in place. Virtually no flooding. So this is hard data that demonstrates that this will work in an extreme flooding event and protect the city for the next 50 to 100 years. That's what has me so excited about it. And what we're doing now is meeting with different neighborhoods across the peninsula in particular and asking them to sign on to supporting this as their portion of the TST allocation. Roughly 12 to 13% of Charleston County's population lives on the peninsula, and it's actually one of the fastest growing in terms of new residents. The peninsula is, believe it or not. And so we're asking for that 7% to go towards this, and the county is on board with allowing for that to happen. And Department of Revenue has confirmed that this type of infrastructure, because of its impact on major arteries in and out of the downtown area, does qualify for a TST funding. So that's why we're pushing for it. Again, I think it can be a real amenity, not just for the peninsula, but creating this linear park and protecting that revenue source for the region just makes a lot of sense. And the time is now to do it. So happy to answer any questions. I appreciate everybody's patience. One thing I did want to add, Mr. Maybank, I would like an opportunity to come and talk with Rosemont, and because I'm doing that on tonight with 3 neighborhoods on the Upper Peninsula that requested me come and give this presentation to them. And I'm also going to do it for some of the Charlestown Neighborhood Association, Lower Peninsula. I want to make sure everybody's covered and that they can have an opportunity to answer, for us to answer any questions that they might have. I see Mr. Gowder there.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I know I'd love to dive into these slides if members of the committee would have the chance to take a look at them later.
Sure.
Yeah, uh, I still see water occurring where buried creeks were in this proposed, and I'm curious what other surface level solutions, whether those are bioswale systems, rainways, other kind of ways of replicating the hydrological benefits these intact creeks would have offered, could be implemented as a part of these solutions, so that we're considering the entirety of the hydrology of the system and not just the perimeter protection as a part of that. And the other thing I'm curious about is whether these tidal basins as part of Lockwood Lakes would remain tidal basins as opposed to potentially becoming sealed and having their ecosystems transition mostly to fresh water instead.
Yeah, so on the first part, yeah, the whole point here is to try and incorporate as many different components to address water holistically. And, I'll say it's not going to solve everything, but I will say that if you take the second largest flooding event that we've ever had, and you have just that little bit of water on the peninsula, I mean, that's a lot more manageable than without, right? And then when it comes to things like Lockwood Lake, it's been a conversation we've had with Fish and Wildlife and OCRM and the Corps, and it's a constructive conversation because, I mean, you do want to make sure that it is more like Long Lake than Colonial Lake, which has maintained wildlife and salt marsh, etc. But on the flip side, if we look at where sea level rise is going, it's also a reality that within a very short period of time, that marsh area right here would be dead anyway, because it would be underwater. So, we're trying to balance these nature-based solutions with just the realities of what we're facing, and understanding, of course, that perfection cannot be the enemy, or can sometimes be the enemy of good. John, you got your hand up? You're still on mute. Yeah.
Yep, there I am. Sorry, guys.
There you
Thanks, Mayor. Great presentation, and I think what you're doing compared to what it used to be is fantastic. Two questions for you. You're talking about 300 million over 7 years. So I'm assuming you're thinking of bonding that. Is that correct?
To be determined, but in all likelihood, there will be some part of a bond. It really would be the county more than anyone, but.
Okay. Well, yeah. When I said you, I meant the out of TST. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, it looks like you're going further out into the marsh in some cases, which I understand. But that sounds like you're going to have to do more saltwater mitigation then. Can you talk about that? What your thoughts are there?
So we just had a great meeting with all of the environmental advocacy groups to talk about what the trade-offs are going to be between the saltwater mitigation and protecting the peninsula. And what we've because I mean, this is all to be determined, right? There's a lot of things that need to be navigated here. And what we've promised is total transparency, but working with the advocacy groups to ensure that we're all aligned on this. And again, I go back to a point I made with Gray. I mean, there are going to need to be some compromises, and we've got to look at it holistically. If we truly do believe these projections, which I do based on the current trends, I mean, we're going to have to address this aggressively, but collectively. One of the most interesting things I found when we went recently over to the Netherlands and to Denmark, and some of you have heard me say this, that they're doing, I mean, those are two countries that are the most progressive in terms of stewards of the environment in the world, and have an incredible reputation for their resiliency. And a lot of what we saw going on over there, very proactive, very progressive, there's no way in hell it could be done in the United States. And so, you know, we do need to work through where exceptions to these regulations need to be made, and make sure we do it in a way that's thoughtful, that doesn't, you know, blow up important and critical legislation, but allows for things like this to happen in a constructive way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Mr. Maybank, I think you had your hand up. I think you're still on mute. We're working on that.
What about now?
I got you. We got you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. In your presentation, I heard you say that there were like 4 stages of this project,
Right.
and for the different communities,
Right.
and Rosemount being the 4th. Is there like a timeline that you can give as to when that would be for the, let's say, the Rosemount area and the Wagner Terrace area?
Sure.
It sounds like that being the last part of the project. When are we looking at projected dates? And a question that seems to linger in the air: Rosemount, Silver Hill, and the community just before or right after Mount Pleasant Street, that's part of the peninsula. Am I correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I want to be clear, because there's ambiguity about when projects are being made, and it seems like we're like the not included or excluded. And I just wanted to be clear with that, so when people ask me, I'll have an answer for them to like
You're very much,
that.
yeah, you're very much included. I mean, I think I do want to just apologize for. There is this meeting tonight, which I understand there was some frustration from maybe some of your residents that Rosemount was not included. And just for full disclosure, I'll take responsibility for that. These 3 neighborhoods specifically reached out to us to meet. And so we should have invited more of the neighborhoods in the area to come. But I'm happy to do the same, as I mentioned earlier, with Silver Hill and Rosemount to discuss this, because it's complicated, and people need to have their voices heard, and you know, understand what is being considered here. As for the timing, the phasing would be every year, starting this year, would be a budget request for each phase. So this year we'd be submitting for High Battery, which is the smallest and we believe easiest to get approved. Then it would be Western Alignment for the 27 budget or in 28 fiscal year, and then Eastern Alignment the year after, and then Rosemount and Wagner Terrace would be, yes, the last one. But though that one is going to be the most nuanced in terms of design, because it's not going to be based on a lot of public feedback, which I think you were a part of, that there's no desire to have hard structure there, have a wall there, and it's much less feasible, frankly, to do the battery concept there. So that is where we're looking at more nature-based solutions and elevation of properties to protect them So it's a bit of a different application. And it may be, though, that it would be something that could be done in parallel with one of the other phases if we wanted to try and expedite it. But I want to make it clear that we're certainly not leaving out Wagner Terrace or Rosemont or the communities further north on the peninsula.
Thank you.
Yep. We got Waterkeeper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to start, would like to commend you for articulating this vision, for how we move forward. I think, in a lot of ways and a lot of different issues, we're kind of dealing with decisions made in the past, and that, we have to go back, and we know so much more now. We know, so much more about sea level rise, but also so much more, about how to correct some of these problems. I think, one of the things I'd like to point out is that as mitigation obligations arise, that we try to focus on same waterway mitigation, right? That we don't ship off the benefits of that mitigation to other places, that we try to, keep the benefits of those mitigation projects, as local and as central to the communities that are impacted as possible. So, that would be kind of one point. The other one is maybe a little bit bigger. I think you've done a really nice job of articulating this through a wider lens, right? How some of these resiliency goals and transportation sales tax opportunities fit with some of the other big projects that the city is, that are going on in the city and are going to remake the city for generations. Everything from Union Pier to the Low Line to the pedestrian bridge over the Ashley. But, there's one big piece I think that maybe has been, kind of left out, and that's, what the plans are for Cainhoy and the Cainhoy Peninsula. And that's, a massive project, 12,000 new homes. Resiliency, raises the specter of resiliency issues with some of the plans, but also, significant traffic impacts. So, would encourage that to become part of this as well.
Absolutely agree there. And I think that's an area that would fall more in line with the tidal and inland and tidal flooding, tidal and inland flooding analysis. But our eyes are very much on the Cainhoy Peninsula, and I'm meeting with the family, I think, in the next 2 weeks to talk about some of those efforts too. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some huge impacts on a variety of fronts coming down the pipe, pun intended, with the Cainhoy Peninsula. Who else we have? I don't see anybody else.
We got about 4 minutes left, Mayor. So wanted to give.
I talk so much.
Yeah, no, you're good. This was for you. Wanted to leave just a minute or two for Matt to kind of give a quick overlook of some things that he could bring in a little more detail about. Obviously, part of this resilience puzzle we talk about is these bigger projects we're doing with the core, but obviously the small and capital projects that Matt and his team do with stormwater across the city. So wanted so y'all can start to think about between our next meeting and on March 5th what you may want to hear a little bit more about. Andrew pointed out some Daniel Island stuff and what's happening over there. So Matt, I'll turn it to you before we close for the day.
Yeah, thanks, Kellen. I think as Kellen laid out pretty well, we're going to plan at the next meeting of this group to discuss a little bit about where, sort of citywide, where we have been in the last year of completed work from large project, small project work, and then how that's evolving and progressing in 2026 for where we'll be targeting work. Again, how do we kind of take a lot of the topics the mayor's talking about and expand that across the entire city and sort of show how all of this project work is fitting together into improving both drainage and water quality across the city.
That's that. And then before we close, I just want everybody to, so you have no excuse not to show up. This is our meeting schedule for 2026. Hopefully everybody got those calendar invites. If you didn't, please let me know. Again, a little homework request as always is think through what you saw today. You saw the list. I will share out, Mayor, I'll share out your presentation with with this group. I'll share my slide with kind of our resilience projects. So take a look through that. Let us know what you want to hear more about, talk with your neighbors, what they want to hear more about, some of their feedback, and particularly looking ahead with some of Matt's projects as well. And then also some of that engagement opportunities and in public outreach, as Mayor said, you know, he's going around to some neighborhoods on the council, on the peninsula. You know, we want to be doing that across the city too. So keep us updated on that front. And other than that, Mayor, I'll let you close us out with any final words.
Again, appreciate everybody's time. It's always good to have a sounding board and a critical eye on some of these big initiatives as it relates to resiliency. You know, this is a tough topic. It's going to take us all rowing in the same direction to really address this stuff head on. But I do want to just stress that I really do believe now is the time. We are well positioned due to those that came before, setting the ground game, if you will, and looking forward to working with you all to move these efforts forward in the upcoming months and years.
Okay, thank you all, and we'll see you all on March